The title of this podcast is Ramblin Woman, and that is not only the name of this cardigan, so consider yourself warned. Hi everyone, welcome to the Rainy Knits podcast. My name is Justine, and this is my knitting podcast. I am going to try my best to put up a full blog post with show notes and everything. So if you prefer to read rather than watch my face awkwardly talk to a camera, you can go to rannyknits.com/podcast, full show notes. I'll do my best to include everything I talk about in here on the blog post. Wow. It has been a while since I have recorded a podcast. So it is the last day of February. 1-800 number, would you answer that? No. That was going so well. It is the last day of February. My last recorded podcast was in December. So yeah, it's been 2 months. I did not intend to take that long of a break. I sort of decided January I just wasn't going to podcast, and then February just snuck by me, and here we are. It's almost March. That's the calendar update portion of this podcast. So there are a couple reasons why I took a break. The main reason is I started a new job, and funny thing about jobs, they cut into your knitting time by a lot. So I didn't have a ton of content, I didn't have a ton of time. January and February were very busy for me, so here we are. So since my last podcast in December, in the last 2 months, I have gained like 50 new subscribers, so that is amazing. I know that might seem like small potatoes to some like bigger podcasts, but for this little tiny YouTube channel, like that's amazing. So welcome to new subscribers. I'm super happy to have you here. Welcome to new viewers. I am amazed that you want to watch my face talk about knitting, so that's awesome. Before I go any further, I want to address the conversation that has been happening on social media regarding race, diversity, inclusion, and specifically it's been happening in our knitting community on Instagram, but it's also, I've read stuff from slow fashion movement Instagrammers and bloggers, and it also in our lives outside of the internet, this conversation has been happening, and I think it's such a necessary discussion, and it has taken far too long for us to get to this point, and I am part of that problem. As a white woman, as a person with incredible privilege, I have failed minorities, I have failed Black, Indigenous, and people of color, just by, one, being part of the problem. I guess not being part of the problem, but not being part of the solution by not speaking out against racism. This is not something that we can ignore. There have been people doing incredible amounts of work in order to bring this issue to people like myself who, I can't say that I didn't notice that my feed on Instagram and my subscription list on YouTube was majority white women and younger white women. I noticed it, and I did small things to try to make my feed more inclusive, make my Instagram a little more diverse, but it wasn't enough, and it shouldn't have taken so many people speaking out and sharing their stories for me to realize this, but that's where I am right now. So what I can do now is pledge to do better, hold myself accountable, and do the work to try and make this a more inclusive community. And talking about this is hard. In case you can't tell, I have stuff written out that I'm reading from, but I'm stumbling, I'm making mistakes. So I will continue to try to do better. I know I will make mistakes, and if I say anything that hurts you or makes you feel excluded, and you are gracious enough to let me know, just know that you will be listened to. And hopefully everyone here, everyone watching, everyone who has subscribed feels the same way, wants to make this place, this little corner of the internet, wants to make it a better place. I'm hoping you feel the same way. If you don't, you have probably already unsubscribed. Bye, I guess? I don't know. Obviously, this is a topic that is hard for me to talk about. Not only because I am stumbling over my words and trying so hard to get it right that it kind of gets lost. It makes me uncomfortable, and I am dealing with that. I am unpacking that. It's a hard one to talk about, but it's so necessary, and I just want to make it clear where I stand going forward. And I want to make it clear that my absence from the podcast for the last 2 months, and largely from Instagram, I have been way less active on Instagram, has nothing to do with this conversation about racism and exclusion in our Instagram, YouTube community. It was just poor timing. I got a job right before we started really discussing this, so I don't want anybody to think that I've been backing away and trying to get out of this conversation by leaving social media. It was just timing. I'm sorry that I'm not more coherent when talking about this, but I will link the Vox article that I hope everyone has already read, but it really clearly talks about everything, kind of the momentum, kind of the reasons why this conversation started, and I'm talking about in a big way because it was going on for a long time before January, mid-January, whenever everything kind of went viral. I don't know. When everybody started, when the ball started getting rolling and it started snowballing. There we go. Yes, the article kind of outlines everything. They interviewed some of the women who really started pushing this conversation, and read the article if you haven't. It's great. It'll get you started if you have no idea what I'm talking about. Now, this is a tricky transition for me because I don't want to just say, okay, now that we've talked about that, let's go on to the knitting. Like, this is not over. We'll keep talking about it, but this is a knitting podcast, and I do want to talk about what I am wearing. So I will be going over everything about this sweater. I anticipate that this is going to be a little bit of a longer episode. and hopefully that's okay. I will be breaking it up. I'm going to be talking about the yarn that I used. I'll be talking about the pattern, the modifications that I did, and a couple cool techniques that I discovered when knitting this. And finally, the steek. So I'll try to put timestamps in the down bar. So if you just want to know about how I did the steek, if you just want to know about the techniques that I did, the modifications that I did, all that will be below and timestamped. I've never done a timestamp, so hopefully I can figure that out. I make no promises, but that should be something that I can do. So yeah, let's talk about Ramblin' Woman by Caitlin Hunter. So I have been really wanting to knit this sweater. I think she came out with it definitely before Rhinebeck, sometime in early fall. I saw it, I thought it was stunning. I was excited about this pattern because it, first of all, I love color work. Second of all, I saw an opportunity to kind of collect different indie dyed yarn and put it all together in this cardigan as kind of as a statement piece, but also something that would be really wearable and something that would be great to take on my trip, which is coming up so soon. I am going to the UK in a couple weeks. I'll be attending the Edinburgh Yarn Festival, which I'm excited and nervous about. I've been to one yarn festival. I went to the Vogue Knitting Live in Seattle a couple years ago, so I don't really know what to expect, but I'm excited. My mom's going to be there with me, and I will be wearing this cardigan. So I thought it would be perfect to travel in, and it also would allow me to try steeking for the very first time. So that was exciting. So I decided I wanted to knit this. I started purchasing yarn for it. I kind of went all over the place with my yarn purchases. I went to okay, so that's not true. I have been to 2 yarn festivals so far. I did go to Yarn Revolution, which was just a little ways north of here in North Seattle, and that was in November. That was a small festival, so sorry Yarn Revolution that I forgot about you for a second. So I did purchase some yarn there for this cardigan, and then yeah, I just kind of started collecting things here and there. I bought some from Knitcraft and Knittery, who used to be based in Australia, but she has moved to the States recently, fairly recently, and so I was super excited to pick up some yarn from her. I included a little partial skein that I had left over from these sample knit that I made for Explorer Fibers. I had just about 70 grams left over from one of the projects that, well, the only project that I made for her, so I included that. And finally, I used some yarn that I hand-dyed with avocado pits and skins, so that was really fun. So this whole sweater has kind of been like me just diving in, and I guess most of the projects that I do are like that, just kind of going for it, not really worrying that I had only dyed yarn once before and it did not turn out successfully, not really worrying about that I had never steeked a project before and I was just gonna go for it with this giant cardigan, you know. It worked out. Would I recommend doing what I did? No, I wouldn't. There are many things that I did on this cardigan that I would not recommend anybody else trying, and I will cover those. I will insert photos, but really quickly, I'll just show it off. So this main color here is the yarn that I dyed with the avocados. It turned out okay. It's a little bit more beigey than I wanted. It's not very pink like I was hoping, but it was fine. And then I used this is Knit Craft and Knittery. I used that for this is contrasting color number 2, this is contrasting color number 4, I think. This darker pink is also Knit Craft and Knittery, and finally the gray, again, Knit Craft and Knittery. And the lighter pink, which isn't showing up very well, is Earl Grey Fiber Co. And the rust in this portion here is Explore Knits and Fibers. Colorway names, bases, all of that can be found on my Ravelry project page. My username is Ranney Knits. There will be a link below for that if you're curious about exactly which bases, which colorway names everything is. I am not even into all the fun techniques that I use that I really want to talk to you about, but I have a couple more things about the yarn. So I did manage to cut costs with this sweater just a little bit. I got a lot of the yarn on sale. I used the partial skein that I already had in stash from Explore Knits and Fibers, and I dyed some of the yarn myself. So my plan all along was to dye the main color with avocados. I got some DK weight yarn from Knit Picks. It's on their Capra base, which is merino, I don't know, it's like 85 merino, I think it's 85% merino, 15% cashmere. So it's a great base. I hadn't worked with the DK weight Capra before, but I had worked with their Capretta, which is their fingering weight of the same fiber makeup. I made a sweater out of that I really like. That's my modern sailor sweater. So yeah, I wanted to dye this yarn myself. I bought the yarn from Knit Picks on sale. They do a big, it's not a Black Friday, it's their, I think they call it their like November sale or something. They have a huge sale, usually like the week before Black Friday, Thanksgiving, and so I picked up 3 skeins of that. I dyed it with fairly good results. I'm pretty happy with the way it turned out. For the amount of preparation that I did before dyeing it, it turned out great. Like, I didn't ruin the 3 skeins of yarn that I just threw in my pod with all my avocados. So that worked out well. I will link some of the tutorials that I watched for avocado dyeing. I would not go off of my experience. I wouldn't ask me how to dye yarn with avocados. I would go with someone who has a little bit more experience with that, but it turned out well. And the white that I used is also Knit Picks. It's their Capretta that I held double. That was something that I picked up. I picked up a couple hanks of that also in their November sale, and that was for a different project. But after purchasing yarn from Knitcraft and Knittery and Earl Grey Fiber Co. and dyeing this yarn, I was playing with all these different combinations, and I decided that instead of going out and buying more yarn, I was just going to use what I had, use the fingering weight, hold it double. I had plenty of yardage and it worked out great. I'm really happy I did that. It just made it slightly cheaper. So I did calculate, all in just on yarn, I spent about $150, which is a lot. This is my most expensive sweater to date, and I don't plan on knitting another one that costs this much for quite a while. This was a splurge sweater. So another thing that I did to cut costs, and this is moving into more techniques that I used and modifications that I did on this sweater, is to modify the color work a little bit. So it does call for 7 colors. Yeah, it does call for 7 different colors. And in order to maximize my yardage, I did use 7 colors, but not in the way that was written in the pattern. So this blue is the contrasting color number 1, I want to say, or is it? Yeah, I think so. Yeah, contrasting color number 1. And this gray here is also supposed to be contrasting color number 1. So I had I put a lot of thought into planning this sweater out and what colors and what yarns I was going to use. However, I did not really look at the yardage requirements when I was making my purchases. I kind of thought I was just going to buy a bunch of single skeins and throw them all together and make a sweater. So the contrasting color number 1 requires 2 skeins of yarn, or it's a skein and a half or something, but I only had 1 of each color of these. So I just mixed up the color work and alternated between the blue and the gray to maximize the color work. And so I've got the gray on the bottom here. Just, yeah. And the other thing I did was use this pink that was contrasting color number 4, maybe? I took the pink and also put it in this here, which was contrasting color number 6, I want to say. Just because I had enough yardage. It was a little bit of math that I had to do to figure out yardage and make sure that I was going to be okay. But yeah, rather than buying another skein of yarn because the other DK weights that I had didn't really work, I just thought I would just use this and put it in down here as well. So that's what I like about color work. I've heard some people not complaining, but I've read some things about people not being on board with these big, over 5 different colors, color work projects, because they cost so much and they require you to buy an entire skein just for a little bit of color work, like this part here, which I understand. And I understand that's it can be a little bit, not a little bit, it can be elitist to have projects like this and to make projects like this, just because they get expensive fast. And that's an issue. And if you were to buy a kit for this sweater from an indie dyed yarn, if you were to buy a kit from this sweater from an indie dyer, it, you know, could go easily well over 200, you know, over 250 even, which is a lot. What I like about these projects is you can mess around with your color work and do things to maximize your yardage. For example, like I used this darker pink down here in this color work, but then when I got to the sleeve portion, this part right there is also supposed to be, it's supposed to match the section down here, which I know is kind of hard to see, but the section down here has the light pink and the dark pink in this color work part, and that's supposed to be the same. But on the sleeves here, I ran out of the darker pink right about here, which I fully anticipated. I had calculated that based on my yardage requirements and expected to run out about here, which I did. And so I just have this light pink is all, or this section right here is all of the light pink Earl Grey Fiber Co. Yarn. Like I said, it's still an expensive sweater. I still spent $150 on it. But I was able to play with it a little bit to cut the costs. I just want to try to be a little bit more honest with you guys, because I've felt the pressure to use indie dyed yarn, and especially since I started podcasting, I feel like the projects that I use commercial yarn, I do still use acrylic yarn. I am not a yarn snob by any means, but being a podcaster and posting stuff on Instagram, being part of that world, it's made me a little bit, I have been in the past hesitant to post stuff about acrylic yarn or, you know, budget-friendly yarn, because I didn't see a lot of that in my feed, and again, that's on me. That's me only following people who are like making these incredibly expensive podcasts, incredibly expensive garments made with all indie dyed yarn, all cashmere, whatever, you know, and I just kind of was in this small little world where that's what people were doing, and I thought that's the only thing people want to see. I didn't post about other stuff because I didn't want to be judged, and that's a weird thing, because this is my space and this is like what I'm doing, and to edit that is doing a disservice to myself, and it's doing a disservice to people who follow me and people who subscribe to my channel and stuff, because, you know, like, you're here to see what I'm doing, and if I'm editing out half of what I'm doing, that's... So I've run through one battery, and now I'm noticing that shadows are appearing on the wall. I've been recording for so long, but I really want to talk about this sweater, so I'm sorry. Again, this is going to be a really long podcast, but I want to talk about this sweater. So, modifications on the color work. I also modified the sleeves just a little bit. When I was picking up the sleeves, so I knit the size small. Haven't mentioned that yet. This is the small size, size small. I don't know what the exact dimensions are. In picking up stitches under the armpit, I ended up with slightly more stitches for the small, so I picked up enough to knit the medium-sized sleeve. I usually like my sleeves a little bit bigger anyway. I did the color work, and then I think it's around, let's see if I can see it. Nope. somewhere around in here. You can't see what I'm pointing to. In the middle of the sleeve, you decrease like 4 stitches or something. So I decreased 8 stitches, I think. I did this is like super confusing and convoluted, but essentially I picked up stitches in the medium size until I got to the decreases. I decreased until I got the small size, so I decreased like 4 more stitches in these first decrease rows, and then knit the small size sleeve for this much. Knit, so my row gauge must have been a little bit, my row gauge must have been slightly different than what was given. I thought I got gauge exactly, but apparently not, because you were supposed to knit a certain amount, and it wasn't very much, and then do the ribbing. You were supposed to knit to like 18 inches or something and then start doing the ribbing, but that wasn't going to be nearly enough length for me. 18 inches sounds long now. Maybe that's wrong. What I did was I got to the end of the color work, decided about how much longer I wanted my sleeves in order for them to hit the right length, and then I just knit. So I think that was about 6 inches that I decided that's how much longer I wanted to. So I knit 3 inches in just straight stockinette, did all the decreases. You do like a ton of decreases, and then just did 3 inches of ribbing, so that I could have longer sleeves. I do like the bell balloon type, you know, when you do like the ton of decreases so that you get a little bit of extra fabric in here. I do like that. I think that's one of the features of this cardigan that kind of dissuades people from making it, but I quite like them. I enjoy this. As you can tell by my weird, creepy petting my arms thing. So I used a few techniques that were new to me while making this garment. Neither of these are written in the pattern, but I picked them up from 2 very, very helpful people on Instagram. So the first one is the way I made my increases, and I wrote this down, so I might be reading it off of it just because I'm really bad at explaining things. If you're new, welcome to me explaining things. Hopefully this will work out a little bit better. Okay, so for the increases, there are a bunch of increase rows on the yoke. You do a lot of increases on the increase rows, so like every other stitch, every third stitch. However, reading again, increase in the okay, so in the pattern it suggested you do a make one left, so making a stitch increase by picking up the bar in between 2 stitches. So I do this one most of the time when I'm doing increases, if not all the time, rather than knitting through the back loop method, but the make one left still makes a little bit of a hole. So that's totally fine if you're doing, you know, like make one left like on a side increase where it's just 1 or 2 per row. When you're doing like 50, 60, 70 make ones on a single row, you get those little holes, and they tend to be pretty noticeable throughout. So the Instagrammer who introduced me to this technique is Dank Fiber, D-A-N-K Fiber. She does a ton of sample knitting. She's a really, really skilled knitter, and I love following her. I love watching, you know, all her creations. She knits so fast. It's such an inspirational account to follow. And she also does a lot of Caitlin Hunter patterns. So she has a video tutorial on her Instagram stories, which you do need an Instagram account to view Instagram stories, but you can do it on a desktop laptop, whatever, a computer rather than on the Instagram app. So basically, the increase, when you want to make an increase, you slip the next stitch. Again, I'm reading here, so slip the next stitch and pick up the left side of the stitch directly under the stitch you just slipped, and then knit your new stitch. So she has a video tutorial. Don't worry, you don't have to just like follow my description of it. There's a video tutorial. It's on her Instagram stories. It's labeled no holes. Go check that out. It's what I did for these ones. Was I just out of focus there? Probably. Okay, so it's what I did for this one, and it was great. It's the most invisible increase that I've seen so far. It's a good one. I don't know if you can hear my neighbor's dog. They must have just left because he is not a happy camper. He's a very cute dog. He is half Corgi and half Australian Shepherd. So he's kind of got like the body of a Corgi with the coloring of an Australian Shepherd and the energy and drive to run and herd of an Australian Shepherd. But he's got these little tiny Corgi legs and this little stupid Corgi butt, and so cute. The other new to me technique that I used in this cardigan was introduced to me by Heidi of the Books and Cables podcast. I believe it's Books and Cables podcast on YouTube. She's also Books and Cables on Instagram. She has a ton of information in her podcast. She is always trying new techniques, and I love watching her. I learn something new in every episode. So she also knit the Ramblin Woman Cardigan. And she has the same philosophy towards floats that I do. I don't catch my floats unless they're like longer than maybe 10 stitches. I don't like the way it looks when you catch floats. It usually puckers a little bit, and sometimes the not the working yarn, but the other yarn that's being, wrapped is pokes through, and it makes things a lot tighter. And you should go watch her podcast on her Ramblin Woman, because she talks a lot about like floats and why you shouldn't wrap your floats or when you should. Anyway, she introduced me to this technique, and it's a way to catch your floats without wrapping them. And the technique is called, did I write it down? Okay, so the extra long floats that are in this cardigan, and really they're only in this section right here. So when you're knitting this and before it's steeked, it's this steek panel that goes across here, and this part here, it has quite a few stitches. It's not more than 10, but it's probably like 7 or 8, and that's the longest section of floats. The longest floats, that little bit right there is the only place that really you should do something to catch those. So this technique that I'm getting to, it's called the invisible stranding. It is part of a paid-for pattern, so I can't tell you how you do it, but the pattern is called It's Not About the Hat. It's by Susan Rainey, no relation. She spells her name in a way that makes sense to English speakers. R-A-I-N-E-Y, and not with 2 N's, and nobody can figure out how to pronounce it. But yeah, so it's a pattern for a hat. It's a colorwork hat, and it's got really long sections between the 2 colorwork parts that normally maybe you would have to do some sort of intarsia or some technique like that. But she has a way of catching your floats, invisible stranding. It's not about the hat. Go check it out. I will show you how those floats look once you've caught them using this method. Okay, So right here is where I have caught my floats using this technique, and it's very easy once you figure out how to do it, like most it's very easy once you figure out how to do it, like with most knitting techniques. It makes this nice little line of stitches. It does tell you to twist the stitches, which I didn't think was important down here when I started using this technique. Or maybe I started twisting them and then I forgot. I think that's what I did. I started with all good intentions of following instructions. I was twisting my stitches. I stopped twisting my stitches down here. It makes a difference. Twist your stitches. So finally, the big finale with this project was the steek, which was terrifying. I was super nervous. This was the first time that I tried steeking anything, and I kind of realized after I knit everything, like maybe I wanted to practice steeking at least once just to see, you know, what it's all about. So I tried steeking my swatch, which did not have a steek panel in the middle of it, which I should have done. I at least should have made a swatch with a steek panel in the middle and just attempted it. But I just like crochet reinforced the middle of my swatch and cut it, which did not go well. A lot of the ends that did not get reinforced with the crochet reinforcement were like flew out, and I freaked out and I got really worried. And so at that point, my sweater was completely knit. The steek panel, I wasn't going to be able to do anything different with the steek panel, and I thought, well, maybe that was just because of, like, because I didn't have, like, that middle panel. I don't know. So I just did the crochet reinforcement, which is what's recommended in the pattern that you do. And so not all of this yarn is very steek friendly. Some of it is superwash. Actually, a surprising amount isn't superwash. I normally work with a lot of superwash yarn, which I'm trying to get away from. But when I was purchasing this yarn and when I was planning this project, I wasn't really thinking about that, because the yarn that Caitlin Hunter uses in this pattern, her sample is superwash. She did the entire thing in Farmer's Daughter's Fiber superwash merino. So I kind of thought, well, I mean, if she did it, then it can't be that bad. I would not recommend knitting this. I would not recommend knitting any steeking project, especially not your first steeking project, in superwash anything. So yeah, I kind of just got lucky, and it happened that a lot of the yarn, the Knitcraft and Knittery, the Knit Picks, well, those two, but those are the majority of the yarn, was not superwash. What's this called? Explorer Fibers is superwash, so this rust part is all superwash yarn, and the Earl Grey Fiber Company is also superwash. So, and I think the Explorer Fibers is very, very close to this. It's close to the same base as Farmer's Daughter Fibers, because they have the same yardage per 100 grams. So I did steek it. I did the crochet reinforcement and steeked it, and most of it is okay. But if you can see, let's see if we can show you this. If you can see the parts that are made with parts that are made with superwash yarn kind of fluffed out. They escaped their crochet reinforcement. And some of them that aren't superwash did the same thing, which freaked me out. Like this part that is the white, that is the two capretta held together, that part kind of escaped a little bit, and I spazzed out. Not gonna lie. So I was freaking out, and nothing that I could find on the internet told you what to do if your steek goes terribly, terribly wrong. Everything that I was reading just said, it'll be fine. Look how easy it is. This'll be great. Nothing that I could find said, like, what happens if you use the wrong yarn and your steek goes wrong. So finally, in like the comments section of a blog post, somebody recommended a different type of crochet reinforcement where you like do a single crochet through your knitting about a stitch and a half in from the steek panel, and that kind of makes this really strong reinforcement that it's invisible on, well, it's not invisible, but it looks like a knit stitch on this side, and then on this side it looks like kind of looks like it was sewn in. So I will, we'll try to get that too. Okay, so here is, it shows up better. It shows up better right here because I did that in, so I made this second crochet reinforcement in the main color yarn, this avocado dyed Knit Picks Capra. So you can kind of see where I did that there. And then on this side, right there, that little line of stitches, that's the crochet reinforcement, the second one. And that kind of just keeps everything in and keeps your steek, hopefully keeps your steek from spilling out. So here's where, that's where it kind of spilled out, but when I did that crochet reinforcement there, it's holding all of those ends in a little bit better. This is the podcast that does not want to be made. So I just took a big long break. I have no idea what exactly I was talking about. I was on the steeking part. So anyway, I did reinforce the steek twice, and my plan now is to take a ribbon and sew this inside flap. I'm thinking about just hand sewing. I know one of the ways to reinforce your steek is to machine sew it before you cut, and I don't trust my machine sewing skills enough. Right now the sewing machine, there we go, words. The sewing machine that I have now I can't figure out how to get the bobbin to the tension. The bobbin tension is off, so I have to figure that out. But I don't want to do anything on a hand knit that's gonna wreck it, because I will. So I'm gonna hand sew a ribbon onto the inside, and that should keep everything together, and I will feel comfortable at that point, like wearing this cardigan. I mean, I feel comfortable in it now, but I'm still worried that the ends are gonna pop out of the reinforcements. So I think once I get it sewn in, I will feel totally confident. I will be able to take it. Gosh, I need to do that soon because I'm taking it on my trip with me, and I leave in less than 2 weeks. So I'll get on that. I think that is all the ramblin' I am going to do about the Ramblin' Woman. No, that's not true. I still have more ramblin' to do. I think this is going to be a good travel project. I think this is going to be a good travel garment. I'm trying to pack as light as possible for my trip. I'm going to be gone for 3 weeks, so we'll see if we'll see how light I end up packing. But this is definitely coming with me. Hopefully I won't be. So it's been cold here in Seattle. We had a snowstorm that we had to take days off from work for a couple days, and it may not have seemed, it was a lot of snow. I mean, it wasn't like an inch or two. It was, I think we had about like 10 inches maybe here. Other places got more. But that is a lot for a city that is not prepared for snow. Like, if you don't have the plows and the salt, and there was a run on snow shovels, you couldn't find a snow shovel in the city. So if you're not prepared for that, that's a lot of snow. So it's been cold here since then. Well, cold here. It's been cold for Seattle and cold for me because apparently I've lost all my Alaska credibility status because I've been really cold. So I've been worried about being too cold on this trip, but now I'm looking at weather over in the UK, and it's been significantly warmer than here, but you never know. I mean, we were having weather in like the 60-degree Fahrenheit area in January, so you never know what can happen. I am never the right temperature, and I have to learn just to accept that but although right now I'm very comfortable, so. Ramblin' Woman. Anyway, hopefully I don't overheat at the festival. I probably will. If you are going to EYF, let me know, please. I would love to meet you. I'm hoping to connect with some people. Yeah, if you see me wearing this, come say hi. Yeah. This dog is just, hopefully, well, you're probably going to be able to hear him. Hopefully you can't hear him. So, the fit of this. So, when I'm sitting down, the fit of this cardigan, I just want to talk about this really briefly, even though I know this podcast is so long. In photos, I tend to see it like kind of draping really, really dangerously close to being uncomfortable on the shoulders. I see a lot of photos of people wearing it kind of like just barely on the shoulder. It's not off the shoulder, but when I'm sitting down, it drapes very nicely. When you're standing up, the weight of it, and it's going to be kind of hard to see, when you're standing up, the weight of it kind of like pulls it here. If I back up a little bit. Yeah, so it tends to be like very, very open. There is a belt. I'm just going to talk like this at you because I'm going to pop up again in a second. So there is a belt that you can knit, but I didn't want to knit the belt. Also, well, I didn't want to knit the belt. I lied. I'm not going to pop up in a second. I didn't want to knit the belt because I was worried that, so if I'm traveling, I was worried that, you know, if I wanted to wear this cardigan open, I was going to have to figure out something to do with the belt. I tend to be very distracted. I don't know if you've noticed, but I tend to be very distracted in general anyway, and doubly so when I'm out in public, and triply so when I am in a place that I've never been before, like a different country. So I was sure I was going to lose the belt, so my original idea was just sew the belt on. So just like tack it on with a couple stitches in the back, so if I wanted to wear it open, it would just hang back there. I wouldn't lose it. But then I was looking at the back of the cardigan, and the back of the cardigan is really nice because you get the full, you get all of the color work. You can see it all really nicely just out there, and I didn't want to take away from all of that work basically by like tacking on a belt that's all in one color and covering up. It would cover up a lot of this part right here with that's a really nice color work detail, and I've seen a lot of people do it in like a variegated or a spun one. Like a lot of spin cycle yarn has been used to knit this part. It's really pretty, but this is just like a cool detail that I didn't want to cover up on the back where you could see all of it in all its glory. So I purchased these jewel, what do you call these? Latch closures. So they just screw on. They've got little screws on the back. I just figured out how to use these, so I was using them and not putting the little washer on the right side of the knit. The right side, the correct side of the knit, in this case the correct side is the wrong side. So you put those little washers, I do have these attached to the sweater right now. See, now I'm going to pop up. So you put the washer on the wrong side of your knitwear and not as I was doing it on this side, because when you do that, these little screws just sneak their way out of your knitting. But yeah, they just screw on, so they're detachable. I'm not too worried about this like making any holes, making any marks. I've been using these. I mean, it hasn't gotten a lot of wear because I'm nervous about this steek edge. I'm trying not to wear it too much before I sew down this steek edge, but I'm not concerned about this pulling. I'm not precious with my knitting either, so but yeah, they come in, well, this version anyway. This is the, I don't know, it doesn't really have a, it just says latch closures. There's a lot of different styles on their website, jewel.com. I purchased this. This isn't sponsored. I just like these. But yeah, so they just snap like that, and I haven't quite figured out the perfect placement of this, but yeah, they work really well. Unsnap. You can wear it open. This looks like a tiny bit dorky with these things when you don't have it snapped, but I think it's a good alternative to a belt. Oops. I'm watching myself in my viewfinder. Look how easy it is. Ta-da! So yeah, I'm still messing with the placement, but that's what I like about these. You can kind of like, you can move them, you can take them off. I have a second set of these because I did not read the website right. I thought that they only came in one. You only got one per thing. So I accidentally ordered 4. I thought I was ordering, you know, just 2 of these things. Anyway, they come in 2, so if you want them, don't make that mistake. You only need to buy of this type. There are other types that you only get 1 per, but I'm sure you can figure it out on the website. Yeah, I thought these were expensive for just one per. I think these were like $32, and I was like, that's really expensive, but they're reusable. It's a good design. I think it's a good solution to a open cardigan. It makes it fit really well. It makes these things make this cardigan fit very well, and yeah, I am happy with them. It is a little ridiculous how long I have been recording this podcast. I don't want to admit it. It's over 3 hours at this point, so I'm going to leave it at that. But thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for tuning in. Hopefully I will get it together. I have every intention of vlogging when I go to EYF. So hopefully the next time you see me will be on my vlog at UIF and not 2 months from now apologizing to everyone for not vlogging at UIF. But the podcast, as far as the podcast goes, maybe once a month I can get it together. Probably not next month because I will be away for most of next month. So next month as in this month, okay? Because time and editing is, yeah, it's gonna happen. So for the month of March, there's probably not going to be a podcast, but hopefully I will find some sort of balance and get a monthly podcast out for April and May. So thank you so much for tuning in. You guys are awesome, and I hope you have a great day, a great weekend, a great week, a great month, whenever you're watching this. Thanks so much, and happy knitting!